John, the story of baseball, at least in New York, is Anthony Volpe making the Yankees as their starting shortstop, the job he always dreamed of. And we have the person who drafted him, Damon Oppenheimer.
Yeah, I think it's great to get Damon on. He drafted Aaron Judge, he drafted Volpe, two guys late in the first round. So those are two good, great draft choices. Judge is already an all-time great with the AL home run record, and Volpe is the story in New York. I would say Senga might be the second story, but Volpe is the story right now in New York. And I've never heard the story about Mike Trout and how the Yankees were going to draft him from Damon, but we all know this story, and it should be very interesting to ask him about that as well.
Well, we'll ask him about all those stories, and John and I will pick our top 3 stories each from the first week in baseball. Then we'll play Hidden Error at the end, if you stick with us on the show with Joel Sherman and John Heyman. John, this is a perfect road trip for you. You've lived in Milwaukee, you've lived in Miami. This is where the Mets have opened their season, first floor in Miami. As we're talking, it's before game 2 of the season against the Brewers. So you've seen every regular season inning so far. There's been some good, there's been some concern. Where are you on the Mets right now?
Yeah, if you asked me yesterday, I would have been all positive. Senga was fabulous, as we recall, in Miami. And yesterday they had a brutal, as our headline in the Post called it, brutal, a pun with the Brewers. I liked it. Game 10-0 loss to Milwaukee. Can't take too much out of one game, but right now I would say mixed. I'm concerned about certain areas with the Mets. The bullpen could be one. I think Raley was a great acquisition. We'll still see on the closer. Obviously, Robertson has looked good. I think Ottavino's looked okay, but still concerned there. And then Carrasco did not look great yesterday. And it wasn't just that he had 2 pitch clock violations. I think it hurried him along. And you've got to be in good shape to keep throwing in under 15 seconds per pitch. And he certainly seemed to tire there in the 5th inning. I know he had a lot of pitches, but it's only the 5th inning and he walked 2 batters. So concern there. Obviously, Verlander getting checked out. That's a concern. So in third base, we're going to be hearing about that a lot. Escobar is a peak and valley guy right now, going through a big valley. Does not look good at all. And I know the fans are going to be saying, go get Beatty. Not yet. That's not happening yet. Escobar's got more rope than this. And they were going to keep going with him.
Yeah, John, they could solve some stuff internally when it comes to offense. If this is their problem as it goes along, they could bring in Beatty, they could bring in Alvarez, even if it's just, they're obviously they don't want to slow down Alvarez's progress as a catcher, but they're not throwing away a $350 million plus payroll on, development. If they've got to get his bat here, they will. The area of concern is pitching depth. And quality pitching depth, both in the bullpen and in the rotation. And they've had both some injury and poor performance early on. And I wonder about that over the long haul. John, we've had about a week of action here as we're speaking. Unfortunately, this has turned into 162 one-game seasons. I remember when we used to have a lot more patience than this. But I just wondered, in broad strokes, we go 3-2-1, you first. Like, what stood out in this barely first week of the season?
I'm going to put him at 3, and that's Shohei Ohtani. I don't think he's 3 on any list really out there, but he's number 3 on my list. Just that first appearance with 6 innings, calling his own pitches, 10 strikeouts. I know it's against the A's, but probably a threat to win the Cy Young as well as the MVP. Of course, Judge is going to give him a run for his money of the MVP, but he's going to be a story all year with that $500 million or more staring him in the face. And, he's not a guy about money. We're talking about the money all the time. He's a guy about playing, and he did that in the WBC, took a bit of a risk there. And, I got to admire this guy, and he's off to a very good start.
Yeah, absolutely. Who's not off to a good start, caught my attention, is the Phillies are 0-4. And it isn't just they're 0-4. They got brutalized these first 4 games. And I think, John, we were in the same boat. We talked about it in spring training. I think we thought this was a very talented team that could withstand the loss of Harper for a while. And, and when he comes back, that will be a big boost. And then they lost Hoskins. But like Schwarber has gotten off terrible. We've got to remember that a lot of these pitchers pitched to, Game 6 of the World Series last year, put a lot of extra innings on it. I would assume they're going to right themselves. I mean, people were like, the Padres started 0-2 and then they won 3 in a row. So like, you know, in a week, the Phillies could be 6-4 or something like that. And it's all right. But the chalk was the 6 teams who made the playoffs in the National League last year were going to make it this year. They kind of like were obvious. And you're looking for who might be vulnerable in that. And at least this first week has made you go, those are big losses, Harper and Hoskins.
Yeah, I have a lot of thoughts on the Phillies. They're one of my next 2 picks. So I'm not going to keep people, I'm going to keep people in suspense about what my comments are. But now they know that Phillies are one of my top 3 stories as well. But
what's number 2 for you, John?
I've got the Yankees looking good with the power. I mean, obviously they got a lot of injury questions. Johnny Brito did a good job. I don't think they're going to need much pitching the way they're hitting. You know, Rodon will be back. Cortez looked good. Cole looked great. And boy, can they hit, you know, obviously Judge with the home runs already. And you've got Stanton, 485 feet. Glaber's looking great. You know, we could see why they won 99 games and why they were on pace for, 120 wins early last year. They got a ton of talent and they're showing it.
Yeah, you know, I think Volpe's energy, besides the fact that he looks like a good player, I think it's given them a little boost coming right out of spring training. On the subject of young players, my number 2 is how good Vargas and Outman have looked for the Dodgers right out of the box. The Dodgers are trying to thread that needle where they took their payroll down a little bit. They're still well over $200 million, but at a time where the Padres built it up, and they're trying to turn over to their next good team, and Outman and Vargas and pitchers like Pepiot and Grove and Miller, etc. Like, if they're able to do this on the run and then be in position to make a run at your number 3 guy, Ohtani, in the offseason, or there's still a lot of rumors that Roki Sasaki, the great young Japanese pitcher, it was supposed to not come until after 2024. There's some rumors out. It might be after 2023, after this season. I think they'd be in play for that. So I think the Dodgers are fascinating. Can they turn over their team and stay elite? I think what they've made the playoffs, is it the last 10 years or the last 11, and they've made the first place in all but one of those years. Can they still hold off the Padres? And if they do, when exactly are the Padres going to win the division?
Well, I had the Padres winning the division, so we'll see about that. I'm not giving up on that one. I did have Vargas for the Rookie of the Year, although when I was out there, he wasn't allowed to swing. But I was hearing nice things about him.
Well, John, you know what's interesting is that he wasn't allowed to swing in spring training. That might have worked to his advantage. He's got like 8 walks already.
Yeah,
maybe he worked on his eye while he was standing there not swinging with the injured finger.
Maybe everyone's going to do that. I mean, just tracking the ball. You think that someone could do that in the backfield? I'm like, what am I watching here? A guy standing there. I almost, except that I'd be afraid of the ball, I can almost do that. But I mean, Vargas, Outman, I mean, they just draft and develop amazingly well, particularly for a team that drafts very, very low, as the Yankees do. And you know, I don't think there's any suspense anymore. My number 1 is it's the Phillies, because I have a lot of anxiety about this pick. I had them winning the division, not getting to the World Series again, but winning the division. They should be a very good team, and it's not a good sign. I know it's only 4 games, but you know, they had Nola was not that good, Wheeler was not that good, Taijuan Walker was not that good. I think Ranger Suarez, we still have a little bit of an issue potentially with him. Obviously, Painter is on the IL. So I do think Harper will be back maybe even late May and surprise folks, and their hitting should be the best in the league. But they're a big concern, you're right, for putting them on the list. And I am very, very worried about them after 4 games.
Yeah. So for my number 1, John, it's the rules. Like, it's hard to ignore how quick the game's playing. But what's really moving fast is there's been 84 stolen bases, and more important, in 100 tries. And I always, it's not a joke, John might laugh here. I always called John to help me with math. John is really good at math, and I'm not. But 84 out of 100, I could figure. That's 84%. That would be by far a record success rate. We're up significantly from this time last year. We're about where things were in the, say, early 2000s for steals per game. The question is, will it get to like the 80s? When teams were averaging like 1.5 a game, or are teams going to figure out how to shut everything down? You know, back picks by catchers, more pitch outs, more athletic pitchers holding. So I'm doing it. What I find fascinating within this, the game's moving faster, the players moving faster, is still the three true outcomes are determining games. Walks are up, strikeouts are up, homers are kind of like at their near historic highs. And if you don't hit home runs, you don't score runs. With all the stolen bases, runs per game are static. So it's a fascinating moment where guys are moving around the bases more, but you still have to be able to strike guys out and hit homers. And I don't know how we unplug that.
Yeah, no, I do like the more steals. I'm not sure if it's the bigger bases. They're not that much bigger, but maybe it's psychological. And also the only 2 disengagements by the pitcher, that may have an effect as well. The rules have been fantastic. We love them here at the New York Post, which really helps us on the deadline so that your stories will be better. I mention that every week because that's the thing I'm most excited about. But the rules are great. My one concern, which I've said this many times, and Rob Manfred, when he was on, he said basically they can still think about what might need to be done even in season, is the fact that, once we get to a huge game and there is anticipation about throwing the ball and hitting the ball and the cat and mouse game of the pitcher and the hitter, is it still going to be, you got to run, you got to pitch it quickly and you got to hit it quickly? When you get to a playoff game, you might want to see that a little bit, have that a little bit of that anticipation, a little bit of that time, and you might want to give guys a little more room. And you
John,
certainly don't want a pitch clock. You certainly don't want a pitch clock violation to end a playoff game. So that's
why
that's
not?
my concern.
Like we talked about this with Rob. He was our guest last week, the commissioner. Like if I were pushing back on that, John, I'd say if Patrick Mahomes doesn't get a playoff in 40 seconds in the Super Bowl, like people don't blame the rules, they blame Patrick Mahomes. If LeBron James doesn't get a shot off in 24 seconds in an NBA Finals, we don't blame the rules, we blame LeBron.
Okay.
And I know there's historic precedent for like playing at a different pace here, but they'll have a whole season, and we were moving too slow. And I think if we start making let's just make it the playoffs or different rules, I don't know. Like I do think by May 1st, this isn't going to be that much of an issue.
I hope not. We did have a strikeout on a pitch clock violation.
Then we'll have a strikeout in the World Series, John.
Well, the World Series is okay, but what if it ends the World Series?
Then it ends the World Series. What if a penalty ends anything in any sport?
All right. Yeah. Well, I get your point, Joel, but I mean, you're not going to like it when the World Series ends and the home plate umpire is pointing to his watch and says, "We're done here." That's not going to be the same as a penalty in football or something like that. I hope and pray that doesn't happen. I doubt it will happen. I think guys will self-correct by then. Maybe there'll be some discretion and the umpire won't do that. I hope, but we worry about everything here.
Yeah, well, we have months and months to worry, but John, you mentioned how low the Yankees traditionally draft. I mentioned Anthony Volpe's energy, and we thought the right person to talk to would be the scouting director of the New York Yankees, Damon Oppenheimer, who drafted not only Anthony Volpe, Aaron Judge. We'll talk about both of them and more if you stick with us on the show with Joel Sherman and John Heyman. We're back on the show with Joel Sherman and John Heyman, and our guest this week, a special guest, someone John and I have known a long time, Damon Oppenheimer, who's been with the New York Yankees since 1993. He's been the scouting director since 2005. And there's always a lot of reasons to talk to Damon, but obviously this season, especially in this town in New York, Anthony Volpe made the team as the starting shortstop. Somehow he's overshadowed a guy who won the AL MVP and hit 62 homers last year. Another guy you drafted, Damon, Aaron Judge. And I'm wondering, can you just a little bit give us an idea of when does a player like Volpe come onto your radar screen? He played for the U.S. under 13, U.S. 15, U.S. 18. I mean, is it as early as 13? Where along the line does he become of interest to the New York Yankees?
Yeah, great question. He's a guy that it just happened to be that we had a scout in Matt Hyde that was out seeing some underclass stuff. And I think the first time he saw Anthony he was about 14 years old. Noticed that he was a good player. And, in our world, that's probably a little too young to really do much in terms of major evaluations, but it put his name on our radar. And then it really took off when he was, about in his junior year at Del Barton and playing summer ball and the Team USA things and just the accolades that he was getting from that's kind of when it really takes off. And then you really bear down and evaluate the tools and everything else.
Volpe, I think, was the 30th pick of the 2019 draft. How did you decide on Volpe at 30? You guys always draft low, so it's not easy to do that. You did get judged low in the draft as well. I think that was 2013, maybe. It was a long time early, quite a while, 2013. So in the 2019, 30th pick was Volpe. How did you decide on Volpe? And I saw him in spring training. He told me it was a super difficult decision. The Yankees versus Vanderbilt, a lot of sleepless nights, and he obviously finally settled on the Yankees signing for over $2 million bonus. How did you convince him?
Well, when we were able to get to go scout Anthony, and we were at the NHSI tournament in Cary, and we were there to see Jack Leiter and Anthony. I mean, and it's a great tournament that they bring a ton of kids into, and so we were sitting there watching Leiter, he was dominating, and Anthony's playing a great shortstop, and he hits a ball out of the park in left field in a real park, and you're just like, well, that part of the game's now coming along too. So it was funny because I go back to the hotel room, and my national cross checker, Brian Barber, who's now the scouting director of the Phillies, he calls me up and he goes, we've been talking about this guy for a long time, but not in the context of the first round. He goes, he's our guy if he gets to us. He's a first rounder. And I was just having the same thought. I was writing this report. I'm going, all his tools have improved, and he's just become a great player. And so anyway, fast forward to getting closer to the draft, and it's a guy that we're obviously locked in on and we think could be a perfect fit for us. But the Vanderbilt thing's real, and he's been telling us that, and all of baseball, that, hey, I'm probably going to school. It's 95%, maybe even more. And so, we end up going, okay, Jim Hendry, who works for us and has, been a former general manager, you guys know. And so he says, hey, I've got a friend who knows the Volpes, and maybe I can, go have dinner with them. So I said, anything. Yeah. So they schedule a dinner. They go to a place, and Jim just shoots straight with the Volpes and the kid and just says, look, you go to college, you go to Vanderbilt, you're probably going to come out in 3 years as a top 5 pick in the draft. We think you're that good. I think you compare to Bregman, guys like that. So, and I think it stunned him that he was that honest about, and didn't try to just, say bad things about college baseball or do any of that. He just said, here's the way we see it. Here's what we think. Now, if you want to be a Yankee, this is your chance, because you're not going to get that opportunity if you go to Vanderbilt and you play the way we think you are. So I'm sure he did have long nights, and he got a lot of pressure to from the Vanderbilt people. But I think in the long run, he just wanted to be a Yankee, and he saw that this was his chance.
Damon, there was a sense, since then, that maybe he said the only teams he'd consider not going to Vanderbilt for were you and the Dodgers. Do you believe that? And on the day of the draft, when you actually take him, do you know he's not going to Vanderbilt, that this isn't like the Garrett Cole situation people could forget, right? You drafted Garrett Cole and he went to UCLA. When you draft him, do you believe he is going to sign with us?
Yes. I mean, we had a lot more contact. We had a lot more assurances. Now, it's still not 100% because you just never know if somebody gets in somebody else's ear again and they change their mind. But we sure had a much better feel that this was going to be a done deal, and that we'd get him signed based off of what the relationship Jim built with the family and the agent. So it was working in our favor.
Do you think it was just you were the Dodgers, Damon, that he would say yes to?
I didn't really know it was. I didn't really know that it would be the Dodgers, but I mean that makes sense. I mean a little bit of sense, but I do think that it was a very few teams that were really involved that thought they'd get it done.
That 2019 draft was a pretty good one. Looking at it right now, we've got some guys in the major leagues already contributing. Adley Rutschman, number 1 pick. You had Bobby Witt Jr., number 2 pick. Corbin Carroll was in that draft. Where did Volpe? I mean, you pick low. You always pick very low. You don't get those. You wouldn't get Adley Rutschman or Bobby Witt Jr., who are unbelievable players as amateurs. Where did Volpe stack up on your draft board? If you had the first pick or the third pick, or where would he have been picked as early as possible for you? And what did you think? I mean, he is 21 now, starting. Are you a little? Are you? I mean, you loved him, but are you a little surprised he got to this point this quickly?
Well, we had him up on our board pretty good. I can't exactly remember the number, but he was in a top tier, let's put it that way, of our guys. So had we been picking early in that draft, he would have still been a target guy for us, so, depending on who else fell. But it would, yeah, we had him stuffed up there pretty good. In terms of how well he's done, that's, realistically, John, this is all on him. He's done everything that you could ask a guy to do. I mean, you think about it, he signed the first year he signs, he goes to Pulaski and he gets sick in Pulaski, and he has, it might have been mono. I can't remember what it exactly was, but it cut his season short. It cut his performance down. It cut his strength down. Then the next year's COVID. And this is when he really took the bull by the horns. We didn't have any minor league stuff going on. We didn't have anything. The kids weren't down in Tampa. They weren't doing anything. He was back up in New Jersey. He went like every day up to Westchester County, and he hit with Jason Lefkowitz, who had this hitting facility that was basically in an art gallery. It's crazy. The pictures of it. The pictures of it are crazy. You walk through an art gallery upstairs, and there's sawdust on the floor from the guys making frames, and this guy's got this cage. And Jason did a great job teaching Anthony to be his own best hitting coach, is what he did. He's got a strength of that. He went to the gym every day. He took it upon himself, and he dominated his off season, or not his off season, his COVID season, by taking care of things himself and making himself better. And then the next year he takes off. So it was really, really impressive what he did on his own to become the player he's been.
Damon, what you're talking about there are intangibles, right? Character stuff, self-motivation, etc. And it's probably become obvious to Yankee fans within even the first, spring training, the first week of the season, that this kid seems to be made of good stock. I wonder, as a scouting director, if you could use Volpe as the example. You're trying to find guys who could play in New York. It's probably a little tougher than even in other places. What are you doing homework-wise on kids, and especially Volpe, to know, hey, yeah, we think that he's not just a special talent. We think he has that other thing also that helps somebody play well in New York.
Yeah, it's really, it is difficult to try to figure out New York. I can tell you one thing is that the kids that come up through our system, that spend the time in our minor leagues and come up as developed players, whether it's international guys or drafted guys, I think that they learn what it takes to be a Yankee, and they learn a little bit about the demands of what's going to happen when they get to New York. So I think that that's a benefit. Now with him, I think that it was a lot of things went into it. He comes from great parents who didn't enable him, and they made him work, but they also afforded him the opportunities to do things. But he was that home support system we found to be really huge. So that part about it's big. He was always a winner. Everywhere you looked around, this guy was on a team that was winning, and he was a major part of it. He was hitting in the top part of the order. He was driving in runs. He was doing, you wanted the ball hit to him, and then you watched him, and he just never took a play off. He never takes a pitch off. I mean, he's engaged all the time. So, that part about it, and then just you do your work as a scout by not just being on the other side of the fence where you're just watching what they do on the field. You're watching, you get down in the dugouts with them, with Matt Hyde, who was our area scout, who ran the area code team and was part of that. These guys, they were on the field with them and saw how they come back into the dugout, say how they interact with their teammates. And that's what he was able to see with Anthony. And he did a great job of being around Anthony, from area code underclass to the area code games to all the Kelly Rodman games that we had, that we were able to be on the field. And I think that's another part of it. And then just getting with you're able to get with coaches that have had that have been with these guys, whether it's the high school coach or the travel ball coach or USA coach. And I think that's where you put the whole thing together.
You know, I spoke to him in spring training several times. He's about the nicest kid, the most polite kid you can ever imagine. Judge, also a very, very nice, pleasant person. I know you evaluate everything when you're a scout. Do you evaluate that? Do you care? I mean, if someone's got incredible tools and is just a jerk, do you eliminate? Have you had cases like that where you just eliminate them completely? Is that part of the evaluation, or is it just, okay, that's nice that he's a nice guy, and okay, we'll take that too?
I think that I don't think that the nice guy part of it is, that's really like a great cherry on top of the whole thing. But they're competitive guys. They're guys that are self-starters. Those are the ones and that's what these guys are. They're good people. I mean, they don't hold themselves into some special area. They're going to be like just good people. And I think, you got to look at their parents and say they raised them right. And that's a big deal. And I think the self-starter thing, and, you take a guy, these guys all have really good tools. Now, the separator is what you guys have just alluded to. It's the makeup, that's the separator. And we've seen guys come through that have had great tools that haven't met their ceiling. Let's put it that way. I mean, and we've seen guys that are just, that have lesser tools that have exceeded their ceiling. But these guys have good tools. You talking Judge and Volpe, they have really good tools, great tools, and great makeup. That's a perfect fit.
John's alluded to it a couple of times, Damon, that you don't have the high draft picks. You don't get the opportunity to take the Bryce Harpers of the world. The Yankees generally are a high-level contending team. Oftentimes they sign free agents and they lose picks. I think in your 18 years, the highest pick you've ever had is 16th. Often you're drafting in the 20s, 30s. One year you didn't have a first pick until number 51. Do you have a philosophy of that might have to differ from other scouting directors simply because you won't have the pick of the crop, and by the time it gets to you, what are you looking for to feel like you can find something special lower in the first round?
Yeah, I mean, it is tough. I mean, it's tough that you're picking down there all the time and you're never really picking at the top, but we've never have. So you don't even know what it would feel like. So and nobody cares. They just care that you produce, right? So in the long run, it's like, it doesn't matter. You don't get anybody telling you, oh, well, I feel sorry for you because you didn't pick up top, or you don't have as many picks as some of the other places, or your pool money. That's the other part about it, is your pool money's less than, so you have less opportunity. But we still don't just try to maximize what we can out of a draft and get, we're still trying to get ceiling, and then we're still trying to get volume of players. And I think that as the Yankees have, we've used a lot of our players to be traded. And I think that comes into some of our evaluations too. Is this guy going to have immediate value? A guy that maybe a little bit later in the draft that you take. So I think we're still trying to do that. Joel, is get the guy with some ceiling at the top, and then get volume of guys that you think can be major leaguers throughout the board.
Yeah, take me back to that 2013 draft. It's very interesting to go back and look at it now. You had 3 picks in that draft, I think one in the 20s, and you had 2 picks back-to-back around 30, 31, somewhere in that area. Took Judge with one of those 2 later picks. Eric Jagallo from Notre Dame was your first pick. And also, Billy McKinney, who's now in the minors, has been a major leaguer with the Yankees and other teams, was picked higher. Somewhere higher than Judge, and so was Clint Frazier, who was briefly a Yankee, as we recall. What did you see in Judge? And it does seem to be kind of an inexact science that, he's 30th now or so, and he's an all-time great. Did you see that high ceiling in him at that draft? Did you feel like it was a little bit of a risk, but a high ceiling?
Yeah, I mean, it's, you can go back and it's Judge at 30, it's Trout at 25 or 23, whatever it was. I mean, there's some guys that slide down the board for sure, and so you go back to, you go back on Jagielo, who we took first in that draft. Okay, and Eric was a good-looking left-handed bat that profiled as a third baseman in Yankee Stadium with power and everything. And he was really doing well. He after we signed and took him, he was doing well. And then he got hit in the head in a instructional league game, and it really messed him up. I mean, it got to where he had concussions, and now he had vision issues and things like that. And then he ended up, after he gets traded, I think he was in the Chapman deal to Cincinnati, and either before or after he gets diabetes, and so he just wasn't bouncing back the same way. But if you go back and look, he was really having a nice progression through the minor leagues, so that would have been nice. But we knew in the draft that just the recon we did, we thought that you could get Jagielo. We had to take Jagielo where we took him, or you were going to lose him to probably like Cincinnati right afterwards. And then that there was just so much information that said Judge is probably going to get down to where we pick. And it was like you just didn't think it was going to be a situation where you had to take him where you had Jagielo. So we rolled the dice, took Eric, and then, Aaron's sitting there for us, and it's like, thank God he was, and he's just been great. And then we backed it up. We thought, okay, now we're going to get the high school left-hander, and it was Ian Clarkin, and Ian got hurt and had issues with just being able to stay healthy. So, it really is the difference between one pick, and one guy's the MVP, and the next guy, poor guy, can't stay healthy, and he's basically out of baseball. So it's wild how that works.
Damon, when we think about baseball players, we think about guys who get better and better. I don't know why we don't think about it in people in like your job, right? Like you're probably a better scouting director today than you were at a certain other time. I'm wondering if you could, again, it's not exactly throwing a dart at a dartboard, but you don't get the opportunity to take the best players. And sometimes you probably take gambles like an Andrew Brackman, right? Like you're hoping there's a certain amount of ceiling there, etc. There's been very big successes. Do you have something you've learned along the way? Because I think if we look at your last, especially 4 or 5 drafts, there's a lot of major league players in there already with good, as you mentioned, many have been used in trades already and are in the major league. What have you learned along the way to kind of like take out some of the gamble when it's always a gamble business?
Well, I think that a lot of credit goes to the staff that we've put together. I mean, and we've lost some guys recently, like I mentioned, Brian Barber, becomes a scouting director, but we've got, good guys working for us, and we've incorporated, analytics, and we've incorporated sports science, and we've incorporated a lot of mental conditioning. So we've increased everything that goes into what we think makes a player. And I think that we've become a lot better at just putting the whole puzzle together. We took Scott Lovekamp, who's my pitching guy, and made him and all he focuses on is pitching. So we've kind of narrowed the field down on what some of the guys are actually scouting, and that they're not all scouting everything. And I think that that's been a big help for us. And our analyst Scott Beneke, he does a great job of making sure that he can deliver the message on what's important when it comes to statistical things that the scouts can use and understand, but he also understands what the scout's eye sees and that their gut. So I think that we're just getting overall, I've been doing this a long time, and finally think like, hey, getting pretty to where we're getting pretty good at this. We're getting better, and year in and year out, we're just getting better at it.
I want you to tell me that Mike Trout story. I know that 2009 draft, I know he was high up on your board. You'd like to get all the players from the New York area you can. You obviously got Volpe from Watchung, Trout from down by the Philly area, but still New Jersey. Did you think you had a shot to get Trout? What did you like about him? And then, do you kind of root for him anyway? Because I think you had him way up on your board. Or do you just feel Wow, we just barely missed out on one there. I think you ended up drafting Slade Heathcott because obviously Trout was gone at that point.
Yeah, it was. That one was like gut wrenching because we really thought that there were a lot of teams that just weren't that on Mike Trout. The fact that it was Southern New Jersey and that he was hard to see, and it was like, so we thought, hey, we got a really good shot, and we loved him. I mean, it was like we were fortunate because everybody at the time we'd go see him, he was really good, and that helps. I mean, when you go see a guy and he hits missiles all over the park and he runs 4 flat down the line and he plays good center field, it's pretty helpful when you're doing your evaluation. So, we did that, and so I'm thinking, gosh, we got a really good shot because there's just not a lot of people that are just seem like they're into this kind of player. I mean, not the player, but the area he's from and all that. But damn, it's like Eddie Bain sitting there and he's the scouting director of the Angels, and he just and he knows what he's looking at, and he pops him after he had 2 picks, so he takes well, who was it?
Grichuk.
The guy, yeah, Randall Grichuk. Yeah, he takes Randall Grichuk first, and I'm thinking, okay, he's not going to take another like high school maybe outfielder back to back, and then he takes him, and you're like, oh man, you got to regroup now, and your heart just kind of sinks, and you think, man, we really had a shot at it. That's such an impactful guy. So yeah, and that changes history, doesn't it? If that guy's there.
Yeah.
One more pick. So I want to ask you to wrap up 2 technical questions, but I do want to throw a bouquet here. I noticed something. There are 10 players left from the 2006 draft still playing in the major leagues this year, and 3 were drafted by Damon Oppenheimer: Ian Kennedy, Mark Melancon, and David Robertson. 3 of the 10 still playing. And I would argue you have a case, especially considering where you draft, the greatest pitching draft in history, because it's those 3 plus Java Chamberlain, Dellin Betances, George Cantos, Zach McAllister, and Daniel McCutcheon, all at least pitched 100 games in the major leagues. Some of them, like Betances, multi-time All-Star, David Robertson, etc. I wanted to throw that out there just because you're nice enough to join us. It's such a special draft. And I just wanted to ask 2 technical questions, and one could be almost like the Trout one. Would you, if you were the czar of baseball, allow draft picks to be traded where maybe you could have moved up and gotten Trout? And what do you think about the draft being in July now? Does that help or hurt instead of where it used to be?
Yeah, so thanks on the 2006 draft. Those guys, that was fun. Those guys have been, and I've stayed in touch with Kennedy and Melancon, and Dellin and all those guys. It's been great. So Kennedy has to keep pitching because he's got so many kids he has to put through college. So we joke about that one.
USC guy like you, right?
Yeah, USC guy. In fact, I just joked with him. I said, "Hey, when you do retire, you remember you still have the college scholarship plan in your original contract that you can use to finish off." But anyway, yeah, I mean, it's the when it comes to the draft itself, I'd be in favor of being able to trade picks. I think it would make for excitement. I think it. In every other sport, even from hockey to football to maybe not as, I don't know about that much about basketball, but the trading of picks is it's exciting. It also creates a level to now you have to figure out value, and people. So your analytics department would probably be deep into the value of a pick compared to, maybe trading it for a AA prospect or something like that. So I really do think that it would create a whole nother excitement level to baseball. And then when it comes to the movement of the time of the draft, you're probably talking to one of the few guys that's actually in favor of it. I thought it was good. I think that the most important draft that you can have is your current draft. And the more time you have to evaluate guys, the better chance you have, I think, to be accurate. And so now, with the draft being when it is, you get kids that are going to go to Cape Cod and play a little bit more. You get more visual, you get more you get more data, you get more wood bat at bats. And then, you also get high school guys that it was, typically the northern kid, the cold weather kid, he was going to be seen in about 3 games. So nowadays you're able to, lengthen this out and probably do a better job, I would think, on the current year's draft. I think that maybe it affects if you have the right staff, you send your staff to the Cape Cod League to see the follows. You send them to some of the high school events to see the follows for the next year, and you keep bearing down on the guys that you're going to draft for this year.
Damon, we do appreciate it. We know how busy you are. Your call, this is being done from a hotel room in the New York area. We won't give away to the other teams, to which New York area you're in, and how many days you spend on the road a year. And John and I, again, we appreciate. We know you a long time, and we appreciate you joining us on the show with Joel Sherman and John Heyman.
Thanks, guys.
John, we're closing where we usually close. What do you got? Hit or error?
Well, I'm going to go error this week. I've been pretty positive lately. Of course, fresh in my mind is that Mets game where they had 4 pitch clock violations, and they had reasons for all of them. But I get it. We're only 5 games into the season, but to have a pitch clock violation on the very first pitch of the game to start the game 1-0, that's a little odd. And I think Buck Showalter, who's really fixated on this as well as everything else to do with baseball, probably didn't sleep last night, and is going to go over it all and talk to all of the offenders from last night's game, and hopefully we won't see a game. And it's not the reason the Mets lost 10-0, but it certainly didn't look good.
You think Buck is fixated? He's like fixated, wrapped and obsessed, followed by driving everybody nuts about this. So I assume that he'll be on top of it. John, mine, I'm going to have a hit this week. The Rays have broken out 4-0, and I wonder if we're seeing the big breakout season from Wander Franco, who opened the season 8 for 15, 4 extra base hits, 2 stolen bases, and 2 tries. Geez, he only turned 22 earlier on March 1st. The Rays are always a strong run prevention team. They're always good pitching. Shane McClanahan. We've seen Jeffrey Springs has jumped up and looks like he's going to be a good pitcher. They still have Tyler Glasnow coming. But if Franco's going to be a star, they're going to be a real beast for the Yankees and the Blue Jays and everyone to deal with in the East.
Yeah, I think Franco's going to be a star. Of course, 3 out of the 4 games were against Detroit. Nothing against Detroit, a lovely city, but again, we always go by these pace. Teams doing great, teams not doing great, and the Rays do surprise me every year. So I should give them more credit than I do.
Yeah, I mean, John, you and I fell in the trap last year of the Angels, and I noticed early on the Angels were one of the teams with the better run differerentials. Then I realized their first 3 games were against the Triple A's. The Triple A's is
I
what
like
we
it.
should call them.
New
right?
nickname.
Yeah. So anyway, thank you for listening to the show, a podcast from the New York Post. Thank you to our producers, Jake Brown and Andrew Hart. Don't forget, the show drops on the Yes app by noon Wednesday every week. Subscribe to the show on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or wherever you listen to podcasts, and please give us a 5-star rating. And we're just 1 week in to this 162 one-game seasons. And you stick with us all year on the show with Joel Sherman and John Heyman. We hope it's a great ride.